Hey, what's up everybody? Today we are going to talk about doing the timing belt on your 300ZX. We're going to go from this to this. All right, so as you can probably see, we are right now in the middle of the timing belt process. We went ahead and took off the intake manifold, everything off the front, valve covers, all that good stuff. Because when you're doing this, you might as well just re-gasket everything. We're gonna go through all that right now and what you need to take off to get to this point. All right, so we're gonna talk about what you had to remove from the engine bay to get to the timing belt. And in this case, we are gonna do the valve cover gaskets as well, so I will include that. All right, so here we go. Let's remove the radiator, fan shroud, accessory belts, crank pulley, water necks for the thermostat, water bypass hoses. There we're going to go ahead and remove the two water necks that are on the motor, clean those up and reseal them. Because you don't want this to leak after you do all this work. Our ignition chip, and then the mounting, the cover that goes on that, cam angle sensor, and mounting plate, lower cover. All right, after you have all this stuff removed, you should be able to see your timing belt, inspect it, and see how close it was to failure. After you remove all this, should your timing belt be exposed, you can go ahead and remove the tensioner, your belt, both idler pulleys, since we are changing both of them. Crank gear, luckily we did not have to cut this off, it slid right off. Remove all 4 of your cam gears, intake gear, exhaust. Once those are out of the way, that'll expose these backing plates. Go ahead and remove those. Of course, when you take that off, there's the thermostat. You want to make sure to change that. All right, after you get the backing plates off and your cam gears, and you've got your crank gear off, go ahead and pull all of your seals. You'll have 4 on each one for each cam gear, and then 1 on the crank for a total of 5 seals that you need to replace. All right, so this is just a quick overview of what needs to be removed from the front of the engine to get to your timing belt and start to replace those components. Now, like I said, since you have all this stuff removed, we went ahead and removed our intake manifold to go ahead and do the spark plugs, check the coils, check any vacuum lines that are broken, which there are plenty of them, fuel lines that might be cracked, and replace our valve cover gaskets because they're leaking, and chances are yours are probably leaking too. So this is for the front of the motor. Now I'll do a quick overview of the intake manifold. Intake tubes. Next part is really this upper intake manifold, and where the bolts are right through the center. That's what holds it to the motor, but there is a ton of the wiring harness runs across here, all the injectors, the coils, all that stuff, which actually you need to take off first. Remove your coil packs, and if they look like this, go ahead and order the right part. We ordered some replacement parts because there's 2 that had whatever you want to call that in. So the coils go there. That'll expose your spark plugs. Injectors go right here. Take off the harness. Take off your cables. Your balance tube, I removed that just to get to all. You got your idle air control right here in the back, and so you just need to disconnect everything. It took me probably about 45 minutes of finding all the vacuum lines and everything to get this off, and I did have my buddy helping me too. So take your time, disconnect stuff. What had me hung up was on the bottom of this intake manifold right here on both sides is the EGR tube. So take that off and it'll probably save you some time. So once you get this off, next part is you're finally there. You got your valve covers. So your valve covers are going to be in 4 sections, 2 on the intake. And the intake side is actually the one that has the replacement gasket. On the exhaust side, you will be using gasket maker. So these are the intake valves, valve cover. And here are the exhaust valve covers. And I've washed these and they're still filthy. This is how disgusting this was. So get them cleaned up. That way you're gonna make a new gasket on there. Before you get to the valve covers, you need to remove this. This is the spark plug tube and ornamental cover. Bolts right there. Now you can access these bad boys.
We're done.
It's okay, bro.
Daddy.
All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and start the assembly process. And since we got everything cleaned off, all the old gaskets removed, pulled out, we are going to go ahead and start with the crank pulley, or the crank seal. Put the crank seal back in. Then we'll do the cam seals. Start from there. All right, now that we have our seals all in place, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The thing I did use, I just took this guy and just tapped it all around. They push in pretty easy, but and this will also stop you from going too far if you don't have a socket that's big enough for that, but this was right there. Super easy, just tap, tap, tap. Got these guys, they need to go back on there. And one thing that you're going to need, because Nissan does not use gaskets for where their water goes, water pump and whatnot. So on these necks, we need some water pump and thermostat housing gasket maker. So we'll use that there, then we'll use it on the water pump. So next we're going to put these in. Now when you do these, there's a plug right here that you need to replace. And I mean, you just kind of got to know or research it, and that's why you're here. Boom. Because that does not come with your gasket kit, because it only comes with the intake valve cover side. So you definitely need to order these. All this stuff, I'm going to put a link for everything. I just got it from Z1 Motorsports for most everything here. They have those. They're cheap. Get 2 of them, 1 for each side. Put those in. We'll put some gasket sealer around those, especially around the 90-degree corners. I always like to make sure and put some gasket sealer there, because that's where it's going to fail first. All right, so we got 1 valve cover for that exhaust side. I'm just going to go right over here and do the same thing over there. All right, both exhaust valve covers are on. Boom. This one on the driver's side was definitely a little bit trickier. The bracket that hooks this to the valve cover, highly recommend that you disconnect that from the oil dipstick tube, attach it to the valve cover, and then rebolt it to the oil dipstick tube. Ask me how I know. Other than that, just fighting it, get in and on, get all your bolts, and let's do the intake manifold valve covers, because I think those are gonna be a lot easier. All right, so I went ahead and put our front plate back on. That way we can get our cam gears all back in place. And just in case we have to take the manifold off, or the valve cover gasket off, to hold the cam from turning, but we should be good. Keep it in top dead center. So throw those cams on and we'll be back at it. All right, so we wanted to get these torqued down. I wanted to make sure the valve covers weren't gonna be in the way. They ended up being in the way, so this one wasn't on. Just pop the bolts off this one. What we're gonna do is just grab this right here with a wrench and throw your torque wrench on there, hit it at 90, between 90 and 98 foot-pounds. Sure, you could just hit it with the impact gun. It'd probably be okay, because it was just about there anyways, and I just hit it with my electric impact, but I wanted to make sure it was torqued correctly. So not a big deal, we're already there. I didn't want to get too far past it. So that's done. We'll continue to throw all the valve cover gaskets back on. These are all torqued. These are just like 14 foot-pounds, so that's easy. And we're well on our way to getting this back up on the street. All right, valve covers are back in place. all 4 of them. We've got our intake valve cover seals, set of 16 that replaces all of those because just another gasket to replace. The ones that are on there are probably super wore out. All right, well, next off, I think what we're gonna do is go ahead and finish up with this area, change the spark plugs, platinum spark plugs. The gap is fine on them as they come. And then we'll put that cover plate back on and replace all the seals that go with that. All right, we'll just change out the spark plugs. I just want to show you what will happen. Look at that. Oil soaked. So that's how bad the valve cover was leaking. Some of these are just covered in oil. Some cheap Autolite spark plugs. I doubt they were OE spec, platinum tipped, but we just went with the Denso. Made in Japan because we got to keep it JDM tight. Platinum tip plugs should be Carl be thanking us just to get rid of all that oil out of there, and the plug will be burning much better. So we're gonna go, and now we're gonna throw these in. So we need our boots. I'll get all this cleaned up, but each one of these plugs, covers, plug tubes have a boot, and then also this right here needs to be replaced, which this is super hard and brittle. See how easy that broke. This is literally how it comes, rubberized in rubberized wrapped up. There's a part number, gasket rocker. So we're gonna, well, need to finish cleaning this up, clean up this whole deal, and then we'll put this all together. So spark plug's just about done. So we got our new rocker gasket. 1, 2, 3 of those. So we got 2 of those, 1 on each side. And then we'll use a total of 4 for each one of these, and then 6 of these guys. And that's what we're looking at right here. So 4 of those, 6 of those. All right, so as you can see, we are moving right along. We got the intake manifold sat into place. Most of it's there. Haven't tightened up the bolts yet. Working from the back, just connecting all the vacuum lines, replacing any broken vacuum lines as we go. Got the coils kind of set back in place. We'll get those tightened up once we're kind of finished and move on from that area. But working from the back, just getting all the hoses hooked up. Now we'll work our way forward. Now we're on to the electrical connectors. So just the same way you took them off, put them back on, and just kind of lays out in one direction. So I think we're just about done with the intake manifold. Continue on with this project a little bit more, and then we'll get back to the front. All right, so we've got it just about back together. Intake manifolds all together, fuel lines. We've got a new fuel filter, I think I already said that. The front of the motor, we put a new power steering pump in here. Got our alternator back in place, everything's hooked up. So this is kind of where, now we're actually getting back to the timing belt part of things. Crank angle sensor, cam angle sensor, whatever you want to call it. We've got that installed. We're gonna go ahead and put our new bearings right here, right there, the tensioner bearings. We'll put the tensioner in, and we've got our new crank gear to install right there. So we're gonna go ahead, I've got all the parts laid out, get those parts out, and we'll put them on. All right, so we've got our idler pulleys all back in place. They're torqued down. It's between 38 and 43 foot-pounds. So I just hit them at 40. The next thing we need to do is install this guy. And this is the front. You see that little dimple right there? The timing belt's pre-marked. We have to mark up all the length, but make sure you put that to the front. This side goes to the back. So we're gonna go ahead and slide that on. You can use a little assembly lube on the snout of the crank to get it to slide on easy, or you can just go by hand. All right, so after we got our crank gear in place correctly, next thing we're gonna do, of course, is put on the timing belt. Now, this part is, of course, the most important part, is to get everything lined up correctly. I'm using the OEM Nissan timing belt and it's got marks. Let's take a look. Now I've got it on the car already, but I'm going to tell you what you need to look for when you put yours on. So the first thing is there is 5 marks. One here, one there, one there, one there. So as you can see, 4 across the top, they're all going to coincide with the marks on the cam gear right there, and then the mark on the timing backing plate, cover backing plate. So there, mark there, mark there. And there's one on the bottom for your crank gear, and that little divot that I had just showed you. You can see the stripe on the belt. It is on the tooth that has the divot in it, and then it's on the oil pump. You can see that right there is the mark for that. So all 3 of those are lined up. So what you want to do, I threw the crank bolt back in right there, as you can see, 27mm on a wrench. Start with the crank, get that lined up. Once you get that lined up, work this way to put the belt on. Go to the exhaust cam gear on the driver's side here, that lined up. Might have to adjust a little bit with this. That's what I did. Also, this guy, once you get the belt on here on the correct tooth, all positioned correctly, slide that right there between the oil pump and the belt, and that will hold tension on that way. Make sure you're not jabbing your belt or putting any grooves in anything you shouldn't be. But that'll hold some tension there. Then you can come up here and get this in place. And you might have to just adjust slightly on the gear, land on there. And then the same thing going forward. Your intake underneath your idler pulley, your other intake valve, over here to your exhaust, and then down to your tensioner. I did have to put this bolt in a little bit to get it, the belt to slide over, but it's on. And then once you've got it all in place, it's going to take you a minute. Go back and check, make sure you have your inspection mirror, flashlight. You want to double check. This is extremely important. This is why you're doing all the work. So check that, make sure everything is in the right place, and then you're good on the timing belt. You're officially replaced, and it's time to move on to the next step. All right, now that we've got everything back up, check all your things, make sure nothing moved, you're still in place. And next is gonna be the moment of truth. Release the tensioner bolt on your tensioner. So we'll give this a check over, and we'll take that bolt out. All right, so after we have it, after we turned our belt, make sure everything was lined back up, we wanna loosen the bolts on the tensioner, which we did. We got 2, and then the nut on the bottom. Then what we wanna do is come back here and put, you can see, right there, put 15 to 18 foot-pounds of pressure on it and tighten our bolts. All right, so we're gonna check our tensioner gap after 5 minutes. Right there, I'm just gonna use a feeler gauge, put it in there, measure what the gap is. And then use our digital caliper here to tell me what the thickness is. 3.5 and 5.2 millimeters, and we are within spec. We're like right at 3.5, so no problem there. That's all good. Now we're gonna spin the crankshaft clockwise 720 degrees. It's gonna be 2 full rotations. Make sure nothing is hitting. Everything's where it should be. Then we will be done with our timing belt. Congratulations, you have installed it correctly. I'm gonna go ahead and throw on our water pump too. All right, so we've got our new water pump here. No gasket, so we are gonna use our gasket maker. It's gonna do a thin bead around the outside there. We'll get it in place, bolt it up. All right, we had a little problem with our O-rings for the, what was that, valve VCT covers. They were too big, I'm not sure why, it doesn't matter. I found some, I sourced out some new ones. Get these things slapped on. Right there, and throw our front covers on, and we are cooking. All right, so we've got our variable cam timing springs and O-rings replaced on our cam gears. Then we go ahead and throw on our timing cover plates. Start with this one, go to this guy, Throw our bolts in, tighten them down. Now we're gonna move on to the water next. One has a nice silicone replacements for the hoses that go there. Hoses in place, put our thermostat in, throw our gasket sealer on that, and that'll be done. We have our crank back on there, everything's tightened down, and we're headed towards the home stretch. All right, we got our thermostat in place. Our beautiful new thermostat in place, and make sure your little bleeder nipple is at the top so air can pass through when we bleed the system. So throw on your water neck, some gasket on there, we'll do both of those, and hook up with our new silicone bypass, water bypass hoses. All right, well there you have it. Your water necks are installed. Go ahead and run the electrical cable across the front. Hook up your electrical connections. I went ahead and ran the studs in the water pump, and I mean, that's it. Now we just have to drop the radiator back in, get all that hooked up, hook up our radiator hoses, intake tubes, the vacuum lines, replace any vacuum line that's broken. And since this is an automatic, we'll be hooking our automatic lines back up, overflow tube. And yeah, that's it. So all the gasket sealer, I probably said this before, calls for 24 hours before we refill, my gosh, refill our coolant system. And so I'm just gonna put everything back and call it a day for today. Let it sit, make sure everything dries. I don't want it to leak. I don't want to tear this thing back apart. I want to drive it. So that's it. All right, I'm throwing the radiator back in, clutch fan, and same way it came out. Should be pretty easy. All right, well, we've got everything put back together. Water necks in place, radiators back in there, fan shroud, belts are ran, electricals ran across the front, covers are on. So at this point, as long as you followed everything I said and did it the same way it came off, you're doing good, and it's gonna start right up. I already started this up. Make sure all your connectors are connected. Go through one time, make sure you didn't forget to tighten down any bolts, all that good stuff, tighten down any hose clamps. So congratulations on your 300ZX timing belt. All right, don't forget to mark and put on your timing belt replacement, service, maintenance, record stickers, or whatever you want to call them. Got one in Japanese and that one. I would highly recommend that you go ahead and keep all your receipts and document the process that you did do this service for your records. And then if you ever go to sell the car, you can document, hey, these are parts we bought, put them on, blah, 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 XYZ. There's our stickers done too. That way, just help protect your investment and your car. So congratulations. I still have to get the coolant put back in the system and get that bled. Check out our next video. I'm going to go over how to do that. Put the link in the description for parts and more information. Check that out. I want to see some more content about 300ZX, 350Z, S13 chassis stuff, Tundra stuff, all kinds of stuff. Consider subscribing. If you got any kind of value out of this, hit that like button because I appreciate it. Enjoy some of the content that I put out there. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, just put them in the comments, whatever. Let me know. Help you out the best I can, or at least send you in the right direction. So until then, I'll talk to you next time.